Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Thriving Talk. This is another Dadson edition in which me, Tim, gets a chance to ask my dad, Tinku Thompson, questions. Welcome, Dad.
Thank you. Glad to be with you again.
A quick reminder to all our listeners. Thriving Talk is available on major platforms like iTunes, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and more. So let's start off with today's episode. Today we're going to talk about anger management and how to manage our anger. So what do you have to say about anger?
Oh, that's a good topic and very interesting. I think very relevant to you. Okay, you know why I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Okay, what I have to say about anger. Before I say anything about anger, let me start off by putting a foundation about what Bible tells about anger. Is that a good place to start?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to read I want to mention some verses here. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 says, "And don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry." And verse 27, "For the anger gives a foothold to the devil." Okay? So it says, don't sin by letting anger control you. So sometimes anger can control us.
Okay.
Then in the same chapter, verse 31 actually says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you." Okay? So here it is asking about getting rid of bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, slander. We know that when we are angry, all those things will come. So Bible is very clear that we have to get rid of all those things.
Okay.
But we need to be tender-hearted, forgiving, being kind, just as God through Christ has forgiven us. The other thing I want to mention is Bible talks about something called as desires of your sinful nature or the work of the flesh. And there is a long list. It's written in Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 onwards. And especially when you come to verse 20, it actually mentions outbursts of anger as one of the work of the flesh or the sinful nature, right? And I think you know that the fruit of the Spirit, what are the fruit of the Spirit?
Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
Yeah, peace, kindness, goodness, patience, gentleness, self-control. All these things actually are counter to anger in our life, right?
Okay.
So that's very clear that when Holy Spirit comes in our life, anger has less place in our life. Okay. Then I want to also remind that James chapter 1 verses 19 says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry." And verse 20 says, "Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires." So, I will stop there. And so I would say that anger is an emotion, but anger is not something which is going to produce good things in most cases. So, and the Bible actually tells us not to have that bad type of anger in our lives.
Okay. So what causes us to get angry?
The cause of anger, it could be a situation or some people's behavior, circumstances which happens in our life. And during those times, we feel justified, right? We think we are right, but somebody has wronged us or they are doing something wrong. At other times, we know that we are in the wrong. Still, to justify it, we tend to get angry. We make a choice in times. And sometimes people are by nature, they get very angry.
Okay.
And they cannot control themselves. So there are multiple reasons, and some people, because of their nature or behavior, they tend to get angry, and they cross the boundaries. So getting angry is one thing, but then in your anger, what are the actions you take? What are the things you do is also of big importance. So anger can be because of circumstances, people's behavior, something wrong somebody might have done. You feel like it should not happen that way. So it could be different reasons for that.
Okay, so I feel like these two things are very similar. So does getting angry and being upset very similar? Are they different?
Being upset, okay. I think they are a little different. Let me try to explain, and let's see what's the conclusion we will come into that. So when we get upset about something, we are unhappy about a situation. It doesn't feel good, but it is not violent in action or thought at that point. For example, somebody does something and we are upset about it, and we just quietly move forward, and that's one way we can say, yeah, I'm upset about it. But what happens is, if we let the feeling of being upset fester and not talk about it, then it slowly or sometimes quickly turn into anger.
Okay.
So anger then can produce violence in action or in our thought, which escalates situation to drastic points.
So being upset leads to being angry.
Yeah, so I don't think we can always control and say that. And I don't think I can say that I will stop being upset, right? That takes a lot of maturity. But as humans, these are our emotions which comes at times, and we may be upset. But if we let it go and then it turns into an anger, and again we don't control it, we don't do anything about it, that can actually lead to what is called as actions related to anger, which can be violent. That's why we see people like killing each other, harming each other, injuring other people. Sometimes it may not be physical, but it could be through words, through what they write about them in social media or some other places. So it could be in different places. So that's why I would say, upset, anger are emotions, but if we don't distinguish and we don't control it, that can be very dangerous.
So now let's get to the main part. So how do we manage or control our anger?
Yeah, that's a interesting, little challenging question. Okay, personally speaking, there was a time in my own life where I used to get angry, right? Not to the extent where I'm become violent or anything, but I used to get. But over the years, I think I've got better in some ways. So let me share some things with you. So number one, I think the Bible teaches us, as we read a little earlier, that we need to be slow to speak, and we should be eager to listen. So we can either speak good things to people around us, or we can speak out bad things.
So opinion of others.
Yeah, out of the same mouth, right? And once we say something and it leaves out of our mouth, we cannot take it back. So we have to really realize that and make an effort to make sure that whatever we are saying is appropriate and it is not something which can trigger anger in other people. So I will come to the point of managing anger.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what happens is we may say something which will trigger a response from the other person, which may be more intense than what we said. And that will trigger a response from our side, which may be a little bit more. That's why we call us argument, and it turns into anger. So initially it may be a verbal argument. Sometimes it can lead to physical, fight, and all those things happen. So it is very important that we are very good and we are quick to listen and slow to speak. So that's one thing. So we have to be very careful what we speak, and we have to be mindful about the fact that even somebody says something which is going to trigger a harsher response from us, we should restrain from that, because it is never going to help us. But
Okay.
many times we have ego, right? And we want to have the last word. Like that's what typically a
Yeah.
fight is, right? We want to prove that the other person is wrong and we are right. So we tend to actually go back and forth with each instance of back and forth. The other person is trying to say something stronger, sometimes louder, sometimes way more powerful than the other person, with the point that with my point, this other person is going to shut themselves up, right? But what happens is, since both are in that mode of both are angry, they are not going to stop, and a lot of times that can end up in a lot of disastrous situations and tragic situations. So, first thing, in order to manage your anger, you need to be slow to speak, and you should be willing to listen. Number two, I would say understand what is the root cause of anger. Sometimes we burst into anger, not and all those situations doesn't warrant us to do that. But sometimes things might have happened over the course of life with repeated actions. Sometimes it could be something which just happened at that moment. See, understand where is the root of the anger and the bitterness we are having. That's very key to actually deal with this issue. Sometimes what happens is repeated betrayal or responses from some people over the years can grow, and it can make us bitter, and one day it all comes out, right? That is also a problem. But I would say that we need to really have a check and see if we have anything where we need to control that. So another thing is we have to, in this case, is if we have to be careful that we are not misdirecting our anger. Sometimes you may be angry with someone and you may take it out on someone else, right? So that's why we have to be careful. The other thing is forgive, and we need to ask for forgiveness. What does it mean? It means that we do not live in a perfect world, but we live in a world which is filled with sin, and people most of the time choosing paths which they should not choose. Because of this, we do have an opportunity to show kindness and forgive others when they do wrong. But a lot of times we don't understand that, and sometimes as a child of God, we have to remember what God has done for us. Like the forgiveness which came through Jesus Christ, we have to really remember that, and then we should be able to look at this. And since God has forgiven us, and He is going to help us to take out this whole issue of anger from us, and we need to move forward. And once you have understood the root cause, then it becomes a little bit more easy to deal with it. The other thing I want to just mention is we need to renew our mind. What does it mean? Bible actually talks about that we have to refresh our mind, and when we get into a mode where we know that we are going to get upset, we are going to get angry, something is happening, we need to really, control that, and I know that it is very difficult, but it can only happen when we have a deep-rooted conviction that we need to follow what the Bible teaches us, and we need to follow what God has commanded us to do, and then only we can do it. So we need to renew our mind, and we need to make sure that we are allowing Holy Spirit to transform us, and as Bible teaches us, and that should happen on a daily basis.
So, is there any, mostly getting angry is a bad thing and we need to ask God to remove it from us, but is there any time when getting angry is okay or correct? What will you say about Jesus getting angry?
Yeah, so that's a question which a lot of people ask, right? So there is something called as occasions of righteous anger. So what does it mean is there can be times our anger is actually directed towards sin, and that is called as a righteous anger. So what does it mean? So we can become angry when injustice through sin is happening. For instance, when we see people are being killed or there is some kind of evil acts going on, and we see that there is unnecessary attacks going on, civil war happening, a lot of things are happening. And at that time, we can become angry, and I think the best way to deal with it is through prayer and spiritual warfare. We need to pray. That kind of anger is not sinful. So, if you look at, you asked this question about Jesus, right? Why did Jesus get angry, right? You're talking about, probably, let's look at the incident where Jesus was cleansing the temple, right?
Yeah.
And at that time, Jesus said, "My Father's house should be called as a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." So there were people selling, buying things over there, and they had actually turned that place into a marketplace, right? And there were a lot of bad things were happening. So his anger was actually directed towards unrighteousness or wrong things which were happening. So I don't think that type of an anger is wrong. What we can do is, in those moments where we are, angry because of righteous reasons, actually we are seeking God on how to respond to the injustice of sin in the world around us, right?
So being angry to correct somebody.
Yeah, correct somebody, or we do not commit evil for evil, right? Instead, we respond in love by praying for change to happen, and but at the same time, we are also angry because of our emotion, and we are upset about the situation, which is actually driven by what Bible teaches us.
Okay. So I know anger can be a really bad thing, and so how does anger affect us mentally or spiritually? Because after you get angry at somebody or you fight with somebody, you always have that lingering like a bad feeling inside of you. So how does it affect us?
Yeah, actually, I would say that anger really affects us mentally and spiritually. The reason I would say is, okay, let's go back to what I read in the beginning, right? Ephesians 4:26. It says, "Don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil." Right? So, what happens is, angry. When you are angry, when you are angry, you are actually having some emotional, feelings which are not good, and you are not giving a good. You are not thinking well about others, right? You want to have some, most of the time, some harm to happen to others or some things like that. Because at the end of the day, you want your side to win, or whatever your point is, that point to win. But we have to also understand that if you're angry, how can you really sincerely pray? Because Bible also teaches us that when you come to offer your sacrifices and you remember that your brother has something against you, leave the sacrifice there and go and get reconciled with the brother first, right? So God actually values a reconciled human relationships a lot. So in that sense, it will be very difficult to go ahead in your spiritual life and move forward if you are really in a state of anger all the time. And but as I said, and as the Bible teaches us, if for some reason we get upset and we get angry, we can actually resolve it, pray about it, leave it, forgive the if somebody has done anything wrong, forgive and move on, knowing that you yourself have received forgiveness from God. And so it definitely affects us mentally and spiritually. So that is why it is very important that we take care of it and we deal with it. And I will also add that it has got to do with this whole concept of maturity. Sometimes if you are not matured, you may react to everything, right?
Okay.
But once you gain that maturity, you will know how to handle it better. And so that's why it is very important. And if it may be with your family members, or somebody in your friend circle, or it may be whoever it may be, but it is very important to handle it.
So, how would you summarize about what you just said?
I would summarize it in this way that, first of all, if you're somebody who is dealing with this issue of anger, I would just say that I will say this way. Have a strong conviction that being angry is not something which God have in our life.
Okay.
He doesn't want us to be angry. God is not pleased with that, and Bible actually tells us that it is a work of the sinful nature, being angry, having outbursts of anger and all. So what that means is, if we are having that issue, this is a sinful thing which we need to work on and overcome. So think about it, and as I shared some tips, be slow to speak, and make sure that you understand what is the root cause of your anger. Forgive and ask for forgiveness when you are wrong. Renew your mind, and you have to differentiate between your righteous anger and your bad angers, right? Why are you angry? So that is all important. So I would say, and remember, having this angry mode in your life all the time is not a good thing to have. And the only way you can overcome that is by trusting God to change. And when we yield ourselves to the working of the Holy Spirit, and as the fruit of the Spirit comes into our life, love, joy, peace, and everything we discussed earlier, that will transform you and change you.
So I hope this episode was a real help to all our viewers, and I hope they take these tips into account. So thank you for sharing, and to all our listeners, thank you for listening. In the coming weeks, we'll be coming back with more Dadson editions of Thriving Talk, and I'll be asking more questions. As we said in the beginning, this episode is available on many different platforms. Do not forget to follow or subscribe to the Thriving Talk podcast on your favorite platform to receive new episodes as they get released. Also remember that my dad has a weekly newsletter in which he shares a lot of good information. The link to the newsletter is in the show notes. Feel free to subscribe to the newsletter. We'll be back, but until then, we need to remember that we need to try to make peace with everyone and live our life with peace.
Thank you. God bless you all.